All right, so in this video, we're going to create a sidebar app that's going to basically give us word counts. But unlike this regular word count that just gives us, see, when we go word count, it gives us the total words and that's it. We're going to create something that's going to give us the total word count for each word. So basically, we're going to count how many times we find this word, then how many times we find this word, and so on, and give the count. So just to demonstrate what that's going to look like, if I go here under counter menu that we're going to create and click word count, it's going to load the sidebar and see, it's just going to populate all of this with all of these words. And there's this pagination that we can go through to get to like different words. We can search within this list. It's actually sorted. We can resort this data if we wanted to. And also, if we go back and keep writing more. So right now, see, we have the word lake 6 times. I'm going to go here and type lake, lake, lake. Well, actually, that's not lake, but that should add 2 more lakes right now to this. So now it's 6. If I click update counts, see, now lake is 8. And to do this, we're going to use our Google Docs, and we're going to use this Metro UI framework that basically gives us a nice framework to do some HTML stuff for this user interface and all this like sorting, all of these things that we did. So let's just get right to it. Okay, so all I have here is an empty Google Doc. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to some place to get some text. See this article about Great Lakes or whatever this is, Wikipedia. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy some of this text, go to that document and paste it without formatting. And that's going to be my text for this whole thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go under Tools and Script Editor. And let's just name this project. And let's just get started by getting this text from this document in a single piece. So I should be able to do that by going here and doing document app. And in this document, we'll get our active document, which will be basically that whole document. And let's just save this in a variable. So I'll call it AD for active document. In this active document, we should be able to get the body of that document. And on that body variable, we should have this get text. And see, it says retrieves the contents of the elements as text string. Excellent. Let's just put it in a variable again. So let's try to do console log of that text to see what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, click on this or Control S, Command S, and run this function called myFunction. We do have to give permissions for this. And it ran, and you can see this is that text from here. So what I need to do in this, I need to be able to get all the words basically from this particular text. So we want to ignore all these commas, question marks, etc., parentheses, and just try to get words. I'm not sure if we're going to be using numbers too in here or not. We'll find out, I guess. I'm just interested in text. So what I'll do to be able to just get the text out of this, I'll run some regular expression on this. So I'll take that text, and on that text, we should have, let's close this. We should have this method match. And we're going to provide a regular expression to match in that text. So I'm going to do this, and right here, we're going to do regular expression. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do any character between A to Z for now. And we need this to be in brackets like this. And we need basically one or more characters like that. So that's that plus sign. So basically, if we start with this G, then it's going to keep going until it hits the end of this, because it's going to find all of these text characters until it hits the space, and space is not going to be one of those characters. So for right now, let's just try to see what this is going to do. And what we're going to do, we're going to do global search for this. Let's just save the results in a variable. So I'll just call it matches equals to this. And let's now try to console log those matches. Let's see what it looks like. Save and run. So if you look here, what I got is some sort of array. And the first word is he. And then we got rate. Let's see what that is and how we got to this. So if you look here, see, it's the Great Lakes. That's what we have. And it didn't get the T, it didn't get the G for those, like this and this, because this is actually case sensitive. So it didn't match those uppercase letters inside of this. So what I'm going to do with this text, before I do the match, I'm going to add this to lowercase. Let's close this again. There it is, to lowercase. And then after we convert that to lowercase, then we're going to do this match. So I'm going to save this and run. Now, because we converted to lowercase first, it's going to get the whole thing, because now we don't deal with uppercase letters anymore. So this looks already pretty good. It seems like we separated those words into an array by doing this. See, it's an array structure. We have this, we have this, we have this. So there's this Mid-East. So for me, like, see this Mid-East, I would classify it a single word instead of two separate words. But I guess it really depends on how you look at this. So if we wanted to include that, so right now, if I look, see, if we look at this after upper, we should be able to see there are two separate words. One is going to be mid, the other one is going to be east. So if we go here, see, we got this, and then we got this. If we wanted that to basically come through as one word, then what we could do, we could just add in this character stats that dash after this A to Z as one of the characters. And now if I save that and run, let's take a look. See, now Mid-East is one word in this case. You could do it both ways. I think I'm going to leave it this way. For me, personally, it makes more sense. So far, we got this whole long array of words. I'm going to assume this is all the words in this particular piece. So what we could do, if we just do matches.length, that should, at this point, tell us how many words are in this particular piece. So we have 288 words in this piece. Now let's see if their word count is different than ours. I assume it might be. So I'm going to go under tools and word count. See, they got 312 words instead of what I have, which is 200 and some. 288. So they're counting more words than I do. It could be because of those dashes. And I also didn't include numbers, so I'm going to assume they're going to count like this one, for example, or something like that as a word as well. Now, if you wanted to also include numbers in this whole thing, you could also include numbers in here between 0 and 9 in your character stats. I don't. I'll just keep words only. I kind of like this. So now at this point that we got to this, we're going to have to go through that list of words right in here. I'm going to run this again. See, this list of words, this array, and we need to figure out how many times each one of these words repeat. So for example, see, we have great, then we have great again, we might have more. So we need to calculate how many times we have the word great. And to do that, we're going to basically loop through this array, and we're going to create an object where we'll just store all these different words as keys of this object. So let's just do that. It will probably make more sense as we do this. So let's go ahead and create an object. Let's actually do words object as plural. So we'll just do an empty object to begin with. Now, this is going to be an empty object to begin with. So inside of this object, we're going to store all these different words as a key inside of that object. And what we're going to do, we're just going to take this matches array. And inside of that, we're going to do a for each loop. And this is going to accept a callback function, and it's going to also accept each one of those words, each one of these items, as the parameter that's going to go here. So what I could do, I could, for example, take this words object and then store that word as the key for that object here. And for now, I'm just going to set it to 1, like this. So let me just try to console log that words object right now so you can see what's going on. So I'm going to save this and run this thing. So now you're going to see that what I got is now, it's not an array, it's an object. And I get the words here. And then we have 1 assigned to each one of those words. So we have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. It doesn't actually count how many. For the time being, we just get a list of words. Now, what's going to be different in this object is that it's not going to have any duplicates. So before we used to have like great, remember, and there was another great. There is not going to be another great here because we cannot have 2 keys that are the same within the object. So my objective here is to, instead of just getting this list of words and getting a 1, to have these numbers updated with the actual count of words. So to do that, when we do this loop, what we can do, we can check if there is already that word in this object, then we can take that number and up the number from 1 or higher. But if the word is not in the object already, then we'll just create this thing that we just did. Just like this. We'll set it equal to 1. So we're going to just add an if statement here. So we'll just say if, and we'll just take this. And basically, we're saying if this exists, and I'm going to do a set of brackets. So if this already exists, then what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to take whatever number it has as a word count and add 1 to it. So if it already exists, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, then it should be equal to whatever the value is at that point. So if the count is 1, it's going to be whatever the value is. So let's say it's 1. And we're going to add 1 to it because at that point we want to add another occurrence of that item to this. And in all the other cases, so I'm going to do else statement here, we'll just do what we did before because it's going to be the first time we're adding that word to this object. So we'll just simply say it should be equal to 1, just like that. So with this, I'm going to try to rerun this and let's take a look and see what we get. So I'm going to go back to this. So you can see we got some counts. So for example, it says that the word lakes appears 15 times. Let's try to go check if that matches to what we see. So I'm going to take this lakes, go to this document, do Control F or Command F and do lakes. And see, it says 9 of 15. So we do have 15 occurrences of the word lakes. So the same way, if we do great, it should be 9. See? 9 right there. That's good. This, it says 31. So just like that. See, I get 36 here. But that's because this is not actually doing things right. Because now it's including like there in here too in the count. And then they, those should not be included in this count. So our count is actually more accurate here. So at this point, what I would like to do, I would like to basically take this object and convert it to an array where it's sorted to have the highest number words on top and the lowest number words all the way down. So to do that, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to take this object global, and this should have this entries in it. If we just take this object we have and pass it to this object entries, just like this, let me just take away this console log. Let's just store this in a variable. So I'm going to say const words array equals to this. And at this point, let's try to console log that words array. So I'm going to save this again, run this same thing. So you can see now what happened. Instead of this being an object, it's actually an array of arrays. And it basically just has the word and the count the same way. So this is more like the spreadsheet way. We have things like in 2 columns in all these rows. But it's not sorted. But because now it's an array, we should have a method sort on top of this. So this already returns an array. So that should have sort method on top of it. See? To be able to sort, we have to sort by these numbers over here. And to sort by numbers, we actually have to do compare function to be able to do this accurately. Now, this is a long topic. How do you actually sort? But I have a video actually covering it. So if you're interested in learning more how exactly this works, then watch my sort method video on arrays. But for now, I'm just going to pass this function to this with these 2 a and b arguments. And what I'm going to do, that a and b is going to be basically one of the 2 rows we need to compare. And what we are trying to compare is these numbers, which is the second item within that row. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say A1 because 0 will be the first item and 1 will be the second item. And I'm going to do minus, and I'm going to then take B again 1 to do this sorting. Again, if you really want to understand what's exactly happening here, I have a video on JavaScript sort method. So for now, I'm just going to do this and try to run this. Let's see what it gives us. So if you look here, what happened is that this is sorted. This is sorted with lowest numbers on top. And then as we keep scrolling down, it gives us the highest count all the way down. Now, I would like to have the opposite, to have the highest count on top instead of doing this. So I'm just going to switch this. So I'm just going to take B1 and do minus A1. And by doing this, if I rerun this, we should be able to see we have an array of arrays, and it has the highest word with the highest count on top, and then it goes like that. So by doing this, we're able to create this function that will give us this array of word counts. So what we're going to do from this function, basically, just get that back. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to return this from this function. And from this point on, if we run this function, it should basically just get us this array with word counts. So let's just rename this function. So I'm going to call it get word counts. Now the next part is to create some sort of user interface so we can actually see our results here. To do that, we're going to basically start by creating an HTML file. So I'll create a new file and I'll call this word count app. And here we're going to do our HTML. For the time being, I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm just going to say hello here. And I'll go to this code GS and do all the backend stuff to be able to basically use this HTML file as a sidebar. So I'm going to go in here. As a matter of fact, let's just keep this separate. I'm going to just leave this function right here, and we'll just create another script file, and I'll just call it UI stuff. Probably not the best name, but call it what you like. So the first thing we're gonna have to do is make sure we basically create HTML from this HTML file. So for that, we're gonna take our HTML service and create template from file. And the file we're gonna pass to this is gonna be this file that's called word count app. And this should be case sensitive, so you wanna be careful here. So word count app, just like that. So let's just put this in a variable. And then we'll take that HTML template and evaluate that. And that should return this HTML output. So once we get that HTML output, we want to put it in a sidebar. So for that, we're going to take our document app and get UI to get the user interface inside of this. So let's just save this in a variable like this. And then I'm going to take that UI. And in this, we should have show sidebar as a method. And this is going to accept user interface, which is basically going to be this HTML output. So as of right now, again, if I run this function, now it's called my function. Again, do all permissions. Let's go back and take a look. See, we have this sidebar, it says hello, which is basically this right there. Now, to get that sidebar to open up, we don't want to come back to this backend editor and run it to get the sidebar here. We want to be able to have some sort of menu here that we can click and open that, and that runs. So first of all, let's just rename this and call it open sidebar. So that will be our sidebar function. And then we're going to create another function to create a menu. And for this, we're going to get our UI again. And in our UI, we're going to create menu. And we're going to give this some item name. So we'll just say counter or whatever you want to call it. And then we'll take that menu, and inside of that, we're going to add an item. And that item is going to have basically whatever it's going to be called. So we're going to call this word count or word count, whatever that's going to be, comma. And then after the comma is going to be the function we want to run when that item is clicked on. And we want to basically just run this function open sidebar to get the sidebar to open, just like that. And finally, we want this create menu to automatically run when we basically open this document. So what we're going to do, we're just going to create this special function on open. And that's going to run automatically every time this document opens. And what I want to do when the document opens is to create this menu. So I'm going to run that function on top. So this should be all this UI stuff that we need to do to be able to basically just load this HTML file in here without having to come back to this editor. So at this point, if I just, well, I'm going to have to refresh this whole thing. So it will take a second here, but we should see a new menu populate here. Well, maybe not. So let's go take a look what happened. Okay, so I think what I did, I forgot here to actually add it to the UI. Okay, so I'm going to add that line. So I did the menu item, I added to the menu, but we need to make sure we add that menu to the UI. So I'm going to save this. Let's just go back and reload. And hopefully this time, see, we got this counter menu. If I open it, there is word count. And if I click on that word count, Good. So we're done with this part of getting the UI. I have to open the script editor again. I'm actually going to close this Wikipedia. So at this point, we got everything we need from the backend side. We got a function that's going to give us all the word counts. We got all this UI stuff that's going to load the sidebar. Now we're going to have to work within the sidebar to actually create a nice interface for our users to be able to see the word counts. And for that, to speed this up, I'm going to use this Metro UI. So metroui.org.ua, that's the link here. So I'm going to go here. So this is similar to, I guess, Bootstrap in some ways. It just has some additional features that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you do. But what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to Get Started. And in here, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit until I find, in this quick start, this starter template. I'm just going to copy this, go to my script, open my HTML, and replace this with that. Save it. So at this point, if I just reopen this, see, it says hello world. Now it has their formatting of their own fonts with this H1 on top. I don't really need that on top here, but we're going to remove that. So what I want next is to get to tables. So I'm going to go to components. And under components, we need to find table. So let's just see where it is. So this base, if I open, you'll see it's just going to be a boring table without a lot of functionality. So we want to just find this one. See, this is in this section, apparently, controls. And if I scroll down, I'm going to go to table. And this should give us some examples of tables. So this is going to be a table that should have pagination inside of it. And the reason I'm trying to use this is because we're likely to have a lot of words. So we probably don't want to have a bunch of words all loaded in a single page. And it will also have like sorting and stuff like that in it if we wanted to. So that's kind of nice. So what we want to do with this, we want to just scroll down and find a good starting point for us to use. I think this should be fine. So right below this, I'm just going to select this, copy it. Actually, I take it back. Let's just keep scrolling down. See, this one has sorting. So let's just copy this one. It's good enough. I'm going to copy this table, go back to my code, and I'm going to remove this H1 right there and paste that table in here. Let's just tap this in to align everything nicely. Now, in our table, we need a column for words and a column for number of occurrences. Now, in their table, they have, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. We're not going to need that many. So what I'm going to need is, well, I'm going to remove this date. I'm going to get rid of this ID. I'm going to remove this money. And instead of this age, we'll call it word count. Or just count, I guess. And this, instead of name, will be word. So that will be our two columns. And both of them apparently are going to be sortable true. And when we build the table, see, this is where that table is going to go. So I'm going to remove all of these and just keep two columns. And for now, just to see how this is going to look like, let's just put a word in here. And get rid of this dots, whatever that is. So if I save this, go back and reload this, let's see what it looks like. We got the search, we got the number of entries, and we got our word and the count right next to it. So what we need to do in this, instead of having this hard-coded with this word and the count, we need to actually automatically populate that from that function that we've created that gets us that list of words. So to do that, we're going to go back to this. And by default, I don't actually need this row in here. So I'm going to get rid of that and keep it empty. And what we're going to do, we're going to basically do all of that with a script. So I'm going to go right below the script and create a script tag. And this is where we're going to write all our JavaScript. So one thing I want to do, I want to make sure I have an ID for this table so I can actually get that table when I need to get that table. So I'll do ID equals, and I'll just call this word table with an uppercase T. This is going to be case sensitive again. So everything in JavaScript is actually case sensitive. So be careful. So I'm going to save this. And below here, we're going to do a script. Let's actually zoom in so hopefully you can see what I'm typing. This whole panel they did on the left is really annoying. So there it is. So I'm going to create an object here. So this is where I'm going to put all my variables within this object so we don't have 1700 variables and functions in our global scope. So we'll just call this word count app. And for now, we'll just make it an empty object, just like that. Now within this word count app, I'm going to create a variable where I'm going to basically get a reference to this table right here. And to do that, I'm going to take that word count app and create a property on it. I'll just call it table. And we're going to make it equal to, and basically here we're going to get a reference to this table. And the way we're going to get a reference, instead of just getting a regular like get element by ID, I want to use this Metro UI framework to be able to get a reference to that whole table that they designed that we can sort and do all these things. And to do that, I'm going to take this global variable they have called Metro. And inside of that, we should have this get plugin function. And what this is going to allow us to do is to pass two arguments here. The second argument is the type of element we're trying to find on our page. So it's going to be, the type of element is going to be a table. And the first argument is the ID of the table we're trying to find. So the ID is word table. So in CSS selectors, that's going to be the pound key for IDs. And we're going to continue that with that word table, this ID right here, to be able to find and store a reference to this basically table in this app. Now, one thing we want to make sure, however, we want to verify that by the time we try to run this line, that table and everything has loaded so we can actually find that table. Because if the page didn't load yet and we tried to get the table, it's going to just give us an error. So for that reason, instead of just running this line out in the open like this, I'm just going to leave it here for now. We're going to move it just a few seconds later. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create another function within this global variable that I've just created. And I'm just going to call this after page load. So I'm creating a function within that object right here. And that's going to basically equal to a function. So what that function is going to do is basically run this. So I'm going to move that over here. What this basically ensures is that this is not going to run right away when it gets to this line. So we need to now tell when to run this function after page load. So just because I called it after page load, it's not going to know that it's supposed to run after the page loads. Now to run it after the page loads, we're going to take our global document object And on this, we're going to have this add event listener. And one of the events on that document is going to be DOM content loaded. So basically when the content loads, and let's make sure we type this right. Again, case sensitive for everything here, comma. And what you pass as the second argument here is what function needs to run when this event happens. So when the page loads, we want to actually run this. So I'm just going to copy and paste it right there. So at this point, what we are basically saying is that once the page loads, let's run this. And that's going to be this function right in here. So when we run this, it's going to run this line, and it's going to go find that table that we called word table from here. And we're going to store that reference inside of this, inside of that table. Now, once we have that reference inside of the table, now we want to take that table and update the content inside of that table, basically, by adding all the words in their counts. And to be able to do that, we need to get that information from this function that we've created here that basically says get word counts. So I'm going to copy that, go back. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do Google script run to be able to run that script in the backend. And I'm going to do dot and do that function, get word counts. So on this, we should have two things with success handler and also with failure handler. So for now, we're going to just concentrate on success handler. So if you did watch any of my web app videos, you already know what this does. So what we're going to do, we're going to pass a callback function here, what function to run after this is done. And I'm going to create the function right inside of this parentheses, so I don't have to create an extra function here. And basically what that function is going to do, it's going to return this words array right here. So I'm just going to use the same variable name, go back to this, and we're going to take that words array and we're going to do our callback function. And I'll use an arrow function this time. So at this point, this words array inside of these brackets is going to be whatever that array was that used to give us all the words with their counts. And what we need to do with that words array, we need to basically put them inside of this table right here that we already have. And we already have a reference to that table inside of this words count app.table. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go inside of this, and that table is going to have this method set items on it. And on that table, we can basically pass array of arrays, which is the actual format we get here with this words array. So I'm just going to pass it right in here to set items of that table. Now, one thing that's going to happen though, even though when you set this items in this Metro UI, it doesn't actually automatically just display the items. You need to make sure you reload the table after you upload the items. So to do that, if I'm not mistaken, it's just called reload. If not, we'll just go back and check. Just like that. So I'm going to take that table and reload it after we set the items with that words array. So I'm going to save this just like that. Go back to this and let's just rerun this and see what we got. So see, it took a second there and then it populated this list of words. And see, it says there are 146 entries, meaning there are 146 unique words in this case. And if I go to page 2, we got the next list, the next list, the next list, and so on, just like that. And I assume we should be able to click here and see we can sort this from the lowest to highest. We can sort it by this alphabetically, But by default, when I open this, it just goes with our regular sorting order. So see, it does show 10 entries. I guess we can change that to like C25. Looks pretty good. So one other thing I want to do here, however, I want to make sure I also have some sort of way to reload this. I don't even know if we need to search, but I guess if you're trying to search if there's a certain word in here, you might use it. So for example, let's say we're trying to search if there's region. See, that will just narrow down and give you the count. Yeah, I guess that's pretty nice. We'll keep that. So at this point, let's add some sort of reload button. So the reason for that, if we keep going here and adding some new text, let's just add lakes, lakes, lakes 3 more times. It's not going to update it here. See, it's still count 15 until I go in here and reload the whole sidebar again. And see, it went up to 18. I want to be able to just have a button here so we can click and reload this thing. So let's go get a nice button from here. Well, maybe if I just search, it will be easier. There it is, buttons. See, we have all these different types of buttons. We should be able to use one of those. I'm just going to go with, see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is the large button. I guess that's a little too big, so I think this one is pretty good. I'll copy the third one from the list. Go back to my HTML, and I want this, I think I'm going to put it above this whole thing on top. So I'll go above the table. Let's actually just add a div here just to keep this organized. And I'm going to add the button right here. So I'm going to change the text. I'm just going to call it update data, maybe. Or counts. Let's do update counts. And let's add an ID to this button so we can work with it. So I'm going to call it update button, like this. So now that I have this update button right here, I want that to run when we click on it. Well, the same thing, really. However, I don't need to go get the reference to the table all over again, because once we store it, we should be able to get to it. We really only need to do this part. So I think it would be probably wise to move this part to its own function. So let's just cut this and go on top here and create a function inside of that variable again. I'm going to call it update data. And I'm going to paste that code in here, just like this. And then in here, once we get the reference to that table, then we can just run that update data function just like this. And that should have the same effect here. So let's just make sure this still works the same way. So I'm going to go back and reload this thing. It does. It's good news. And we do have the button on top. So now I want to make sure when I click on this button, it reloads this thing. So to do that, I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to basically add an event listener to the button. So let's get a reference to that button after the page loads right in here. So after we get this, we update the data, then let's get a reference to that button. So we'll do word count app dot button. And that should be equal to, and we'll just do a regular reference, document get element by ID. And the ID of the button was update button. So once we do this, it will store that reference to that button here. And to that button, right after that page load, we'll add an event listener. And when somebody clicks on that button, we want to run a function that will basically reload the data. And we already have that function right here. This is the function update data that, let's just move this down, that actually runs and updates the data. So I'm just going to copy this and put it right in here. So now with this, it will wait for the page to load. Then after the page loads, it's going to go find the table. Then it's going to update the data in that table. And then we're going to get a reference to the button. And then we're going to add an event listener to that button. If you click on it, then we're going to run that update data function. So with this, let's just make sure we save this, go back and reload and see what happens. These are the counts. See, we have 15 occurrences of the word lakes. Let's just go in here and add a couple of more of those. So now I have 4 more, so it should update to 19 if this works. So I'm going to just go here and click update counts and see updated to 19. Very good. So if I go and do great, that should update this one to 10 now. Click again. All right, so I guess the only thing left to do at this point is just make this look a little nicer, to add maybe a nicer title here on top, add a little heading here on top, push this away a little bit from the search box and all of that, and that should do it. So let's start by updating this name, the title. So that should be right in here in our, well, I guess UI stuff right in here when we create this HTML service. So right in here, before we evaluate in that HTML template, if I'm not mistaken, we should have, well, maybe I am mistaken. So it's probably in HTML output. So let's go after this. Not template, but output. See, right here, we should have something like set title or something like that. Yep, set title. I'm going to change that and call that word count app. So if I save this and go back and reload, we should be able to see how this is changing to word count app. Good. So now let's add a little bit of heading on top of this, again, to just repeat the same thing, I guess. So I'm going to go to my HTML. And let's just go above everything right in here. I'll just start with a div, I guess, again, just to keep this organized. And we'll do an H3, I guess. Let's try to see how large that is. Let's make sure we close that. Save it. So now at this point, if I go back and reload, we should have that heading here on top. See? We could go to Metro and see what we could do to make it look nicer. Let's just do headings, search, see what's available here. See, this is H1, H2, H3. Yeah, I think I'm just going to stay with what I have. That's fine. Maybe even make it smaller. So let's just change this to H4. Save that, go back and reload. Should just get a little smaller than that. Okay, so now let's add a little space below this update counts button. So let's see if they have a spacer or some utilities for that. See, spacing. Let's try that. So margin classes, padding classes. So PL, I guess that's padding left, padding right, and then the size, that's pretty much, I guess, how it works. So let's just try to do this. So I'll do like ML dash, actually MB, margin bottom, dash some number. So I'll go right below, actually for this div, I'm going to do a class, and we'll do MB, margin bottom, lowercase, 4. Let's see what that looks like. See, that created that space below here. If we wanted something more, we could go probably 5 or 6, I assume. I'm also going to try to center both of these things. So let's see if they have something already. They probably do. Text alignment, I guess. Okay, there it is. See, text center is the class here. So I'm going to go back and do that for this div, or maybe actually for this h4. So class text center, and I'm going to try to do that for this as well. Let's see what happens. Let's try that. Save it and go back and reload. So this worked. It's aligned in the middle. We probably need a little space actually above that, but this didn't work. So like I thought, the button didn't work out very well. I'm going to figure something out for that. Before I do that, I want to add a little space on top of this. So I'm going to do a class and do empty for margin top. And I'll do -4 again, I guess. And that should create a little more space above this whole thing. See? I guess now let's see what we can do with these buttons. So let's just go to their button documentation. There are different colors. So I guess one thing I would like to do is change the color from this primary to a different color. Maybe we'll do with this yellow or this green. I'll go with the green. It's success, apparently. Let's add that. So that would be for this button. See, instead of primary, we would do success right here as a class. So let's go back and let's look at maybe they have flex boxes or something like that we can use here. Okay, I think this should work for us. So let's see what's going on here. So we're going to do deflex and then justify content center. And we need to do this for the main div. So I'm going to copy that, go back to this. And for this div that I have for the button right here, I'm just going to add those classes right in here after the space. Let's try to reload this and see what we got. There it is. Now we have our centered button. Okay, so we got our button. It should update as we keep changing this. There it is. We have our text, we have our search, we have our number of entries. I think that pretty much covers everything we need to do. And that should do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.